Hello and welcome. I'm Omar Salem and this is the Product.Live. Today we are going to continue having the same never-ending discussion about product strategy, product vision, and what is the best way possible to do that and execute on product management practices within a larger perspective. And our guest today is Tim Herbig. Tim Herbig is one of the, in my opinion, best experts in the industry talking about product strategy in general. And I'm really looking forward to discuss with him what does he think about how to practice product management within this context. Hello, Tim.
Hey Omar, thanks so much for having me in the kind words to introduce myself.
And thank you so much. And it's really a pleasure and honor to have you here in the Product.Live. So thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah, and let's also give a shout out to our mutual friend Petra, who introduced me to you, who's been on the
Exactly,
podcast before.
exactly. Thank you so much, Petra. I really appreciate this introduction.
Yeah,
Yeah, first of all, just for whoever doesn't know you that well from before, can you give us like some intro about yourself?
sure. Yeah, my name is Tim. I'm based in Germany, just where I was born and raised as well. I've been in product management since 2010, where during a working student role, somebody had the great idea to do Scrum and pointed at me and said like, "Hey, you're going to be the product owner," and I was like, "Sure." What do I do? And then I was busy filling out user story templates and arguing with very senior developers of what to do. So needless to say, that didn't work out for this company. Ever since then, I worked in a bunch of different industries as a product manager and head of product. I worked in publishing. I worked in professional networking. I worked in a couple of interesting startups. Found my way into consulting for consultancy a bit as well. Worked in B2B, which was also very fun to unlearn all those fun B2C practices and relearn B2B strategies. And in 2019, I then went independent as a product management coach and consultant, which is what I do these days. And my focus is to work with mature, experienced, curious product teams across the globe and help them to connect the dots of product strategy, OKRs, and product discovery, so that they can make real progress and do less busy work and less framework work to focus on what matters. And that's what I do these days through content like this appearance today. Also love to write on my blog and my newsletter, which is a regular outlet for my thoughts. So is LinkedIn, and through courses, coaching, and workshops I do pretty much all over Europe and sometimes even beyond that with product teams.
I would encourage everyone to be regular visitors to your blog specifically because it was actually, the stuff that you write was one of the things that I really learned from. That was one of my main
Nice.
learning sources. So it's really good. Please, everyone, check it out. And I wanted to kick off this discussion with a question that I like to ask almost to everyone, and see how the different perspectives vary and
Right.
different people see the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's about how would you define the or put the definition and also the differences between product vision or just vision, strategy, and a roadmap.
Yeah, let's get right into the deep end, right? I'm sure a
Yeah,
lot of listeners will have plenty of opinions about that.
of
So
course.
I'm happy to share the definitions that just help me convey the message the best to the people I work with. The thing I also would want to add, which is something I started doing recently, or not that recently, is that talking about the definition, but even more importantly, I'll try to talk about what is the value each of these artifacts has to provide and for whom. Like basically treating the way you work like a product in a way. So, and let's start with the vision, right? I think the product vision or company vision, product vision, I think it's universally applicable. It basically describes the future you want to create for whoever your audience is, right? It's the future state you want to create, and you want to describe how it's different from where they are today. That, of course, requires a bit of an understanding of the market you want to go after, what the current issues are, and really just paint the bigger picture where you want to go. And I think the job product vision really has, and I would encourage teams to rather define their vision based on the value it should provide for them rather than the definition is the product vision. The audience of the product vision is your team members and your company. It's not something you show to your users. It's for your team members. So the job of a product vision is to inspire team members. Like that's the job. So whatever you do when you create your vision, use this as a test. Like how inspiring is it or how uncomfortable is it as a test to see if your product vision is on point. The product strategy
Okay.
then, commonly said, is I would probably define it best is like a set of choices that helps you move closer to your product vision and allows teams to say no to things. And I think that is the big value product strategy has to provide. So again, the main audience for your product strategy are not your users. Your main audience are your team members, maybe other teams as well, and stakeholders. And whatever you create as a product strategy should allow you to say no to things. I think that's the big test it has to withstand. Whatever format you pick, whatever structure you pick, it should allow you to say no to things, or more deliberate less yes. And then the roadmap really, again, it's another internal artifact. It's predominantly meant for internal people. Other than in B2B, you might share your roadmap with enterprise customers to get them on board. But really, to me, a product roadmap is like it's almost like a communication tool towards stakeholders as like, these are the next priorities we're going to pursue in light of the strategy choices that we make. And here's the things we're going to do. And also here are the things we're going to use to measure if those things we're doing are actually successful. So the success metrics. So it's not just the list of features. And I think these are how those things align. Like all of these three are meant for internal audiences, internal recipients, the vision and the strategy really for your team predominantly, and the roadmap more for your stakeholders and other team members to communicate priorities. And yeah, that's what I think these three artifacts have to do and have to provide.
Okay. I really like that. I haven't heard that perspective from anyone before. That who are the audience for these different things, vision, strategy, and the roadmap, and that is intended internally to the team, right?
I think it's
Specifically about the vision.
started to, and it was a messaging that started to resonate with more people I would talk to. Is like, we are more or less good at treating our products, right? We say for our products, we say for whom are we building, for who are we solving a problem, and all that stuff. And we measure success of the products we're working on. But I think a lot of teams don't do that for the way they work, right? It's like whatever framework you use or activity you pursue, what should it do for you? And who's, as I said, who apply the same principle? For whom is this artifact? And then you want to reverse engineer. Because again, the job of, let's say, a roadmap is to communicate priorities to stakeholders. If you choose a format your stakeholders don't understand, it won't be able to do that job.
Okay, cool. I actually have a question out of nowhere here. I generally don't know the answer for it, but since we're talking about the audience for a specific artifact and so on, do you think that some of these things that are mainly intended for internal teams and so on could also be promoted somehow externally? Like if we're talking about an external facing a customer facing product, something that is like highly engaging with customers, and also something that is high level, like the actual vision or the actual strategy for the overall company or the overall product on a holistic level, not on a very micro level. Do you think there might be cases of a vision or maybe a strategy, definitely not a roadmap, but like a vision or a strategy that could be communicated in the same way internally and externally?
I'm not so sure if I would say it's the same way. In general, I would almost disagree. I think if any of these three artifacts has a value in external communication, I think it would be the roadmap. And let me tell you why I think that is. Because I think honestly, I think your customers don't care about your vision. They don't care the inspiring picture, right? It's like, what's in it for them? It's like, cool, you want to, change the world or whatever, make it easier. It's like, but what's in it for me? And the vision doesn't answer that in the short term, right? The vision is slow. Basically, you don't want to achieve your vision. It's all about the journey. And with your strategy, again, I would argue the way you articulate your strategy, I think there are parts of your strategy which you can expose to customers, right? I think whatever you use as a format for strategy, but you could talk about, okay, we're going after this customer segment. We're going after, I don't know, Asian SMBs, or we're building finance software. You could say to them, look, and maybe it's obviously it's a B2B situation. You're like, we're prioritizing these three problem spaces in the next 12 months, right? Or we're trying to differentiate ourselves through this feature. You could probably find a way to de-risk that part of your strategy. But I would say it's not about communicating it. It's more like testing those parts of the strategy with the audience. I think you wouldn't just show it. That's how I see it. And I think, again, like this roadmap example is oftentimes, there's a heated debate of like who to show it to you. There are a couple of great success cases where a company just had a public roadmap and had great success. I think the biggest one that comes to my mind is Hotjar. Like in the earliest days of Hotjar, they basically had a Trello board as their roadmap, and they just showed it to people and let people vote on it and submit new ideas. And that's how they built this strong and tight like connection with the early adopters. Right? They formed a passionate early adopter community because they were building what they were asking for, literally. Now, so it's difficult to say that doesn't work. However, for most companies, I would argue, if you were to try to do something like a public roadmap, I would not make the roadmap not about the features. I would make it about like use cases or problems, and have people or customers not vote, because that's what you typically do with public roadmaps, not vote on features. You would have them vote on use cases, but not just any vote. You would want to use it as a data source, as in how often in the last 4 weeks did you have this problem, right? You want specific, like a stronger signal than just, hey, I want that. Because if you ask customers, do you want this feature? I have yet to meet a customer who says, no, I don't want that feature, right? Customers always want everything all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, very fresh perspective on this as well. So thank you for this. And okay, so let's get into the main thing, the main event. Even on your website and your writings, the main things that you always try to, like, the categories that you like to contribute to are strategy, discovery, and OKRs, for example, as a way of measurement. So I wanted to start with discovery. And one of the ways that I also try to guide the episodes and the discussions is, imagine that there is someone that is just starting in product management, and then they are getting promoted or whatever, going through the IC career, and then they turn into a manager, and then they go away. So we discuss the perspective of someone that is working individually and then trying to lead a team to do some work. And also, I like to mix it with what would they do if they have different types of products. So again, customer-facing products or platform products, for example, backend products and so on. Because I've personally been exposed to both sides, and I know that there is a lot of contrast between these different types of things. So starting with discovery. And I think discovery is one of the very crucial topics in product management that sometimes, due to rushing and trying to deliver many things and many requests, management wants a lot of things, that discovery doesn't always take its time, the time that it deserves. But also with the contrasts of different types of products, things that are external facing, internal facing, backend platforms, different types of things, growth, all of these different types of product management. How do you see discovery as a practice that has to be there, but maybe done in different ways?
For sure. So I think, again, it's helpful. I found it helpful to come back to what's the value product discovery has to provide, right? And I think the core value product discovery has to provide is to help product teams reduce uncertainty around problems worth solving, solutions worth building, like loosely separating these. The problem is, I think that oftentimes might not land as well with like business stakeholders. And I recently worked with a product manager who shared this term with me, where she said the way she started to communicate it was product discovery is a means to protect the investment of the company. And I really love that because it's obviously it's the same thing, but it's much more business oriented, and it's the truth, right? I mean, funding a product team is an investment the company makes, right? You can clearly see how much money a team costs, and there's like, we want this investment to like work as not efficiently but effectively as possible. We want the most. We don't want to waste things. And I think that's a good way to frame it as well. To say like, you increase it's not a guarantee, but you increase your chances of that what you're doing, what you end up investing in, like your most precious resources, has the highest chance. It's not a guarantee, but the highest chance of actually succeeding. Of course, succeeding is relative, but typically succeeding means you solve the right customer problems in a way that contributes to business goals and business value. right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you take these fundamentals at heart, I think it's clear that, and I meet a lot of platform teams that talk about, we don't do discovery. Like, we can't do discovery. We're an internal facing team. And I think it's not true, because even if you're an internal team, and I would be curious to hear what your experience is, but even if you're an internal team, you have an audience, you have people you try to solve problems for. Even if if you're a DevOps platform, you're trying to solve problems for people in the company. It's the same
Yeah.
thing, right?
Your customers are developers. That's it.
Exactly. And you can apply the same principles of truly understanding what they're struggling with through qualitative or quantitative data, testing solutions, measuring success. All of that can be done the same way. I think you need
Mm-hmm.
different tactics, right? I think the
Mm-hmm.
pattern is the same, but you need different tactics, because you talk differently to a fellow engineer compared to an external recruited user, right? You might not do the whole charade with like interview rooms and come in and greeting. You just like sit down with them. But the fundamental principles for how to ask non-leading questions that
Yeah.
help you uncover the truth, you can do that whether you chat to a colleague or an external user. So I think, again, coming back to this core thing, reduce the uncertainty or protect the investment. And the beauty of that is, I think, is that this question, starting with this question, basically asking yourself, whatever you're presented with, how can I reduce uncertainty from here? And don't think, now I have to go back to the start and write this one pager. Now I have to
Mm-hmm.
first do whatever map tree thingy I prefer. It's like, you can ask yourself anytime, how can I reduce uncertainty? Sometimes the only way to reduce uncertainty is to ship something. Shipping to learn is highly undervalued, I think. Sometimes that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. And sometimes it might be qualitative or quantitative, but always asking, what can I do next to reduce uncertainty? And again, then of course that requires, the range of techniques that are at your disposal. Like, what technique could I utilize now? But come from this question rather than a framework or a given process.
Okay. Okay, but it's something that I always try to promote as well. What you just said, don't be obsessed with the process. Don't be
Yeah.
obsessed with the framework. It's not something that everyone has to follow, but like try
Yeah.
always to chase the value of why do we apply such a
Why do
framework.
we do this? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And something also that you said is really interesting here. Shipping for knowing you're shipping for, like if there's something that I'm really uncertain about, I think it's okay that you try to build something and experiment with it,
Yeah.
and that the experimentation part, like it doesn't have to be 100% justified, because that's the essence of
Right.
experimentation, right? We're trying to understand. I don't know. Like, I genuinely
Yeah.
don't know. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to put together an experiment to understand more. I think that I also saw it a couple of times in companies that have this experimentation mindset, which is something that is very good. But
Yeah.
again, sometimes it happens that people start obsessing with the how perfect the experiment should be, and
Yeah.
how perfect the results should be, and that uh, we always have to have successful experiments. And if the experiment has like some negative impact and so on, then it's not successful, and that's something bad. Which is actually, I would go against and say that even if it has negative impact, that's a successful experiment, because it's
Yeah.
giving you a result and you're learning
Yeah.
something, right?
Yeah. I think I've been guilty of that myself. I think it's when you when you look at all the different discovery practices that are promoted out there, it's easy to get lost in the process, right? And
Mm,
I did that as well. I certainly got lost in discovery process a couple of times.
yeah,
And one of the main questions I get when I work with teams is, they ask for, how do I know when discovery is done?
yeah,
And of course, you could wait, discovery is never done, yada, yada. But what they mean is, when do I transition from trying to test an idea to actually building it? When do I make this leap? Right? When do I take this leap? That's the question they have. And I love,
yeah,
like, two people influenced my thinking on this recently a lot due to their pragmatism. One is Ravi Mehta, who's a former CPO at Tinder, if I'm not mistaken, and who also wrote the Product Strategy Stack, one of my favorite
yeah,
articles out there. And he said, basically, the job of discovery is that you get to informed conviction. And I really like that because I played that back to teams. It's like you have to get to a state of informed conviction. No scoring framework will tell you that. It's not about a score. It's about, can you get to a state where you can stand in for making the investment into building the solution? That's the thing. That's the state, this informed conviction. And then the other, again, the other voice that really influenced this is Casey Winters, who's a former CPO at Eventbrite, who really wrote this amazing blog post about the pragmatism that needs to be applied when testing things. And he used this basically early in your career, you are obsessed with interviews and do one more interview and this experiment. And later on, you realize shipping to learn is a thing. And shipping to learn is nothing bad. Because really, if you really bring it back to, I like to tell that to teams, look, you can have the most perfect problem understanding, job to be done statement, impact map, whatever the framework, you can have the most perfect problem space understanding. If you never deliver any solution to solve that problem, you basically have not improved someone's behavior. You basically didn't create value for the people you set out to create value for. You created value for the organization for not building the wrong things. But if you never ship anything, you're not really solving the customer problem and you're not driving the business goal. So discovery is just the means to an end of increasing the chances of what you're shipping is correct. But just discovery and just problem, and you have the perfect validated solution, but you never build it. That's like, whose gain is that?
Yeah. If you don't deliver, then that it doesn't exist actually, right?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't exist. Yeah.
I love that you jumped to that point, because that was about to be my next question about how do you avoid reaching the point of analysis paralysis and being so obsessed with as you exactly said, like just one more user test, just one more interview, and how to balance between the discovery and the delivery part. So yes, there is this tendency that delivery is something that is happening 100% of the time. So now we are trying to promote that discovery is as important and everything, but also we're not saying that discovery is a never ending. Okay, there is continuous discovery and it always should be happening, but per topic, per point.
Exactly.
It's not something that
That's the thing people get wrong. I think I love that you brought this up, as like continuing to do discovery does not mean that you constantly evaluate the same thing, right? You at one point you will have to make that transition of committing to building something. It's just like that you make discovery a continued practice, that you continue to do it. It doesn't mean you do it for the same thing. It doesn't. I think also it doesn't mean you do it to the same degree every time, because there will be the period where the biggest thing, your biggest responsibility is to build the freaking thing. And that means heads down execution and not more interviews, right? That period will be there. And I think maybe to add to that point, I recently I reread Atomic Habits from James Clear, obviously amazing book. And he talks about this difference between motions and actions. And I started to see that a lot of times with product teams as like the motions is the thing that makes the work that makes you feel good. It's like, I did this analysis, I did user segmentation, I wrote a jobs to be done statement. But the actions is talking to the customer, testing the solution, shipping. The action is what creates the real progress. And I see a lot of teams. I actually had that this morning in a coaching session where a team I was working with was a little bit too obsessed with getting the actor map of an impact map. Right, they want is this the user segment? Is this the user segment? And I was like, look, it doesn't matter. Just pick the first segment that feels solid and go down the route of understanding their problem and getting to because the moment of truth is when you validate the solution for their problem. So you have to get to that point as fast as possible, and staying horizontally and debating which segment to go after, which outcome to use. That's motion stuff. Like you're busy, but you're not making progress compared to going down to the root of seeking the real content and real data. That's the actionable stuff.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, that's that is what reflects in your key results and objectives and everything. It's not the discovery doesn't reflect in that kind of work. All of these meetings and discussions doesn't reflect in how you measure success, but actionable and actions and things that you actually build are what reflects results, right? And
Yeah.
to capitalize
Yeah.
on this point, related to experimentation, I
Mhm.
remember when I was having my discussion with our friend Petra, and we were talking
Yeah.
about how are you building the product environment, the working environment itself, and the value of having trust and security and giving the space to innovate and so on, and how crucial it is to be able to raise something like an experimentation culture and so on. Having the courage to go into things that to dive into the unknown, try different things, and not fearing really the consequences of that, and having the security and safety of trying different things, and so on. Because to your point that you mentioned earlier, like um, the tendency to get lost and to um, have your brain go to think in a framework, very structured way,
Yeah.
and being obsessed with that framework. I believe that it's like some sort of a defense mechanism, or like
Hmm.
trying to feel safe when you're dealing
Yeah.
with a lot of uncertainty, which is something natural in the discovery process, right?
Right.
So I don't know anything of what I'm doing, and everything is like super ambiguous. I cannot see anything. It's all
Yeah.
foggy and smoky. And the only way for me to feel safe is to grab the raft of a framework.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just stick
100%.
to it. I get obsessed with it just to feel safe. But that would mean that maybe there are some lost potential over there. Maybe you don't experiment freely. Maybe you don't, do this and that, and try to break things
Yeah.
in your quest for understanding more.
Yeah.
Right?
100%. And I think it's the I think the method or framework, whatever you want to call it, that I think shows that very often in my experience is like when companies try to score, to prioritize, right? When you do try to do scoring, and there's I think there's a time and place to do like scoring. It's not about the scoring framework, but trying to, what you said, trying to distill uncertainty into a number, into a stack ranked list. Like this is right, place 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6 is wrong. That's like just a way to cover up this uncertainty and make you, again, as you said, make you feel good, make you feel more in control. And again, it's a human, natural thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's important to be aware of that, I would say, at least.
Okay, great. So we're done with the discovery now, and we reduced
We're done. We
the
have
yeah,
enough
we're
informed
done.
conviction.
We
Yeah.
have we have some theory about something that we want to build and so on. Something important here is the prioritization. So we have 4 or 5 different things, and again, if we're talking about just specifically prioritization and what would be the steps, as you define strategy, the steps that you try to take towards the vision. There are million ways or frameworks, again, to do prioritization. It
Yeah.
should be helping you, but sometimes it confuses you. And
Yeah.
even in the definition itself, like the definition looks flashy, like the
Yeah.
rice model, for example. Like,
Yeah.
how do you like measure confidence, for example? Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
some things like look flashy, they look like they're very sophisticated models, but like how
Yeah.
to actually apply it. And at the end of the day, there has to be, it always comes down, I think, to the comparison between the effort and the impact, right?
Mhm.
Somehow. So, like, what do you think between all of these different frameworks? What is the main thing that you should be focusing on when you're trying to do any kind of prioritization, whether it's on a strategic level or on a roadmap level?
Yeah. I think I think that's a great question, and I think it's, in my experience, I've seen that it almost always comes down to, quote unquote, the common sense the team has. And what I mean by that is like, look, which problem among the users we have talked about. And so hopefully through your strategy, you had a bit of a clearer direction of what customer segment to focus on, and you didn't try to talk to anyone at the same time or send out a survey to millions of people and got a gazillion different results. So hopefully you had some kind of focus from your strategy in the first place. But among those data points you have, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, what's the pattern? Like what's the thing people keep bringing up, right? It might not be the exact word for word thing, but it might be like, what's the pattern? And like what comes up most often, going after that, right? In the light, of course, of the actual eventual business goal you're trying to contribute to, or the the strategic priority. And again, I think that sounds, of course, that sounds a little bit fluffy, but I think that's what it essentially is. And I think that's what all these frameworks are trying to do, right? When you have like something like RISE or ICE, they ask you for what's the impact, which basically means what's the strategic contribution. The confidence, right? The confidence, I think it's oftentimes is about what data do you have, or how strong is the data that you have, that this is a real problem. Again, which speaks back to this point of, have you seen the pattern of discovery, the pattern of problems among the data points you have? And how easy is it to test this thing? How easy is it to reduce uncertainty further? And I think, again, it's these frameworks are just more or less asking the same question of like, how does it fit with your strategic intent? And which of these has the biggest potential, as in it's the most pressing one among your users? I think that's what it comes down to. And I think that the exact prioritization framework is a matter of personal preference and personal flavor. It's like whatever works in your organization best to align people, do it. I've seen teams that had very sophisticated scoring frameworks. They're very mature, and the more they mature, the less sophisticated their prioritization frameworks became. Right? They went from like scoring 10 different criteria. They went back to, as you said, impact effort. It's like let's cut all this noise. In fact, I would even say, for me, the number of scoring criteria is a bit of a red flag to me almost. I think if you have more than 3, 4, 5, 6 scoring criteria, you're trying to uncover, to mask this uncertainty. You're not, it won't help you. The numbers won't tell you the final order or the right thing to do.
Yeah, it makes sense because you have much more moving parts, and
Yeah.
like in any physics theory, that would make it more unstable, right? So I think it makes sense here. So yeah, thank you for this answer. I think it was straight to the point. That there's nothing around that to discuss that much. And then, like, just one step before going into the delivery part and doing
Yeah.
this is how to make sure that we're able to measure impact for whatever that we're building, to make sure that we understand whether
Yeah.
we're successful or not, right? So I noticed from everything that you promote and talk about is that you always adopt the OKR framework or the OKR way of measuring impact, right?
Yeah.
So why OKRs?
Why OKRs? Honestly, I like to say to teams, like, I don't care if you use OKRs. As in, I care that you make metrics guided decisions. That's what I would call metrics informed decisions. OKRs are just one format to utilize metrics. That's how I would call it. And I believe it is a format of using metrics that can be particularly helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't work for every team. I don't say it's the only right thing to do. It's the thing that I used the most in my career, but I'm not emotional about it. As like it has it has pros, it has cons. It works for some, it doesn't work for others. That's that. I think the biggest mistake people could make would be to be too rigid about their OKR usage, which is what I think is oftentimes just like we talked about earlier with other frameworks. If you put the process before the value, it will be like a annoying thing you try to take care of. But if you go back to how can I adopt like OKRs in a way that they help me in my environment as a product team that I am, I think that's good. And again, the unfortunate truth is for a lot of teams is that OKRs don't solve any of your problems. If anything, they expose the problems you have, right? My favorite example being you set OKRs for a team, and this team does work, and the metrics don't change. Right? No matter what they do, the metrics don't change. And this will tell you two things. Like either the metric is not within the sphere of influence of the team, right? So you picked a metric that has big dependencies, so this team can't work on it. So this tells you a lot about team structure. Maybe this team isn't really empowered to really own a metric. Or the other root cause could be that you picked a metric that the team could influence, but it's too lagging, it takes too long to change, meaning the team needs more data and better understanding of the leading indicators driving this lagging indicator. And this is just one example of what OKRs bring to the surface when you try to use that. When you try to measure, when you try to define metrics that signal, have you solved customer problems? Has the behavior changed? And you regularly try to measure that. That's what you try to do for measuring the progress. And again, OKRs will just show you where you're falling short process-wise or tactic-wise. And so that's what I think the beauty of it is. Again, the important thing is to adapt it and to change, to fix the other things that make using OKRs hard or easy. It's not about OKRs. OKRs isn't to blame that you don't have tracking in place.
Okay, so it's interesting because anytime I try to discuss specifically the OKR framework with anyone, they jump right into the pros, but not really the cons, or that successful use cases or examples of teams that adopted it in a specific way. But from your experience, can we discuss more on the con side? Like, because sometimes, sometimes, as you said, some teams try to adopt this or try to apply it and so on, but they don't realize that maybe it's not for them. And there's a difference between that this is not for you or you're applying it in the wrong way. And they 100%. Get stuck into okay, we're not writing objectives in the best way possible, or we're not identifying the best metrics and so on. And they try to optimize on this and do it better and so on, but it's still not working for them. And they're not realizing that this is not the right framework for you or right way to measure impact for you. There could be something else. So can we discuss this side of the coin a little bit?
Love to. I think I can give you, off the top of my head, like 3 example use cases where it's very fair to debate whether the use of OKRs makes sense in a context like that. Mm-hmm. So the first one would be when you're either starting within the company something completely new from scratch, or you're just getting started as a product team or just founding a startup. Because if you trying to measure the uncertainty, that's difficult, right? Trying to put up metrics that signal you if you're reducing uncertainty. I think you can use OKRs for product discovery work, but there's a case to be made that they don't make sense as well, right? The way I do that with teams is look, what can you control? What's within your sphere of influence during discovery? It is the customer exposure, the practices you use, your reduction of uncertainty. You could turn these into OKRs and measure your progress, but you don't have to, right? There's a fair argument if that doesn't make sense. And look, if I tell that to teams, if this doesn't add value to the way you work, then just don't use OKRs in this situation. That's totally fine. That's the first situation. When you're very explorative and discovering, you can use them, but you don't have to. The second situation is when, and I touched on this a little bit, when you just don't have the measurability in place in a company, right? You might write down those great customer outcomes you want to solve, but you don't have tracking in place, you don't have the data in place, the metrics don't change as often. Then the question is, okay, why do you write a metric that won't change? Like, what happens? You look at it throughout the quarter and the metric stays at 0 or 0% progress. What's the point of doing that, right? So I think being aware that can you actually measure the work? And the third situation, which is completely different, and I meet that quite a lot actually, because a lot of companies do have migration projects, right? Whether you like them or not, you might have a migration, like a technical migration to the cloud or a new infrastructure, whatever it might be, right? And I see I meet quite a lot of teams who are in a migration project, and they have OKRs, but these OKRs are all about NPS, revenue, bug fixes, and then I ask them, how long until your migrated product will be in the hands of customers? And they're like 12 to 18 months. It's like, okay, so the metrics you just showed me will stay at literally 0 for 18 months. How is that a goal that helps you measure your progress? Because that's the purpose of OKRs. Can you measure your progress and adjust your actions? It doesn't, right? It doesn't. And again, similar to discovery, there's a case to be made. You can come up with metrics for migration, but these will, of course, be much more output oriented, because the only things you can control during a migration is your velocity speed, maybe the quality of the staging environment, the user acceptance test, the requirements translated, all that kind of stuff. And there's a case to be made that you don't need to translate these into OKRs. You can have a nice Gantt chart and you just blaze through the work that's clearly laid out for the next 18 months. And that's why it's another 50-50 thing. You could use OKRs for the migration, but there's a case to be made you don't need to.
Yeah.
I think those are 3 situations where it's really like, don't use OKRs for the sake of using OKRs. It's basically what I'm trying to say, I guess.
Yeah. Again, like it's not the new trendy thing that everyone has to follow, and that's it. Like it's there for a reason, and it has benefits for some people, but also for some other teams, it might be not the best way to do that.
Yeah. The trendy thing is to solve customer problems, create business value, and whatever technique helps you get there, that's the right technique. Nothing else is trendy and worth.
Yeah, just chase value. I think one of the most things that were obsessively consumed as a result of the trend is the agile framework in general, and how many companies and people were obsessed with the process of being agile and doing scrum practices and doing all of these things, skipping the point of what's the value out of it, to the extent that they ended up not being agile at all, like with no flexibility, no workarounds, or to reach an actual business value with the shortest way, with the leanest way possible. And maybe we could see that with OKRs as well. So it's really important to make sure that we're just focusing on the value that we're trying to do, and our actual job is to create value to the customers and to the business at the same time, not being obsessing about what are the steps we take to reach that point, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, cool. One also of the popular questions that I always like to ask is, how do you see the difference of applying all of these processes, starting by discovery or delivery, the ways of measuring impact and so on, in different sizes of companies? So what would be the difference between a corporate and a startup, an early stage startup, and a company in between, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in the start, I think probably the biggest differentiator is that in the startup situation, like everything you do has to be in service of staying alive, right?
Yeah.
There's in early stages, there's much more on the line, right? It's really like everything we have to do has to contribute to us staying alive, and staying alive could mean, getting more customer revenue, securing the next funding round, whatever it might be. And there's a much harder truth to hold all the efforts you make against that, compared to large corporates, where probably the biggest risk is that Susan from marketing becomes upset with your product decision. So it's much more about stakeholder management and bringing people along. And there's nothing wrong with that expectation from another department. It's like, no, we have to bring people along. So I guess it's I would say the biggest difference, again, is this like almost like life or death situation from a product perspective, like can the product survive? Can the company survive? Compared to organizations, it's how do we make the best progress possible within the boundaries and constraints of the organization? And these constraints could be dependencies to other teams. It could be established practices in the company. It could be company says we want to work in a certain way. We want to use those frameworks. We want to use OKRs this way or that way. And that might be the game you end up playing. So I think understanding the context you're in, and that sounds super cliche, almost feel bad for saying it, but understanding the needs of the environment you're in, whether it's survival or coherence and consistency across teams. And I think that's probably the biggest differentiator. And also one of the best quotes I read, I don't know from whom it was, is called, "Show me the incentive, I show you the outcome." And I think that is very, very important, particularly in larger organizations, where you understand, how is this person that maybe gets under my skin or I'm annoyed by, how is this person incentivized? Like, what is their incentive? And this will put so much context onto how they behave, and in turn can help you meet this person where they are. So I think that's the bit you have to understand. And the same is true in startup, like the founder, what's the incentive of the founder? Keep the company alive. So when they throw random feature suggestions at you at 2 a.m. in the morning, it is because they want to keep the company alive. It's not because they want to annoy you. right?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that this is another way of practicing empathy, which is one of the main
Yeah.
skills of product managers. That you start extending this empathy to different stakeholders around you, right?
100%.
Um, and I was just having a discussion with recording another episode, and with Adam Thomas, and also he's really focused on product strategy as
Nice.
well.
Yeah.
And we were discussing that. You know, this is my next question to you as well. I'd like to have your point on this. Like with companies that has a lot of business stakeholders, different stakeholders, whether it's on operations, marketing, sales, whatever functions inside the company, and
Yeah.
in order to be easily aligned with them and try to do all of these alignments and align the strategy and so on, you really need to practice this kind of empathy from their
Mhm.
shoes. So if we're talking about sales teams, for example, and you know how obsessed they were with the requests that they have, and they want
Yeah.
things to be able to sell because they actually, that's the way that they support their families and their homes. They work
Yeah.
and they take their money based on commissions, and they have to generate sales, and they have to do these kind of sales. It's not just that they think that they own the best solution
Yeah.
possible and they have the brightest ideas. They just want to close a sale today, this month, so they could
Mhm.
actually have the commission for this month,
Yeah.
for example, right? So like understanding these, where people are coming from, and possibly the other things that they are thinking about, would actually help you put a strategy or a roadmap or try to execute on something. Maybe it will help you break it down even in smaller pieces that you could deliver, so that you could support different teams across the
Yeah.
company and so on, right?
Yeah. I love that.
Uh, yeah, and like the main question here, what I originally wanted to ask you is, how do you see this way, or any way of having strategic alignment, or
Mhm.
alignment between product teams and other functional teams across the company, whatever the function is. The higher level of this question is, how do you see the term that everyone also is like sharing right now, being product led, and product led growth, and product that led this, and product led that,
Yeah.
especially that in other especially that in other functions of business, they also have sales led, marketing led, everything led. Like everyone is trying to lead. And
Yeah.
I think what happens at the end is that all of these people, so product is trying to lead sales, marketing, and so on, and they
Yeah.
sit at the table. Again, they forget the value of what we're
Yeah.
trying to do.
Exactly. How about
And
being value led?
yeah, exactly. So, like, how do you see this whole, thing working together, trying to put
Yeah.
it a unified
Yeah.
strategy for a company, for example?
Oof. Okay. How much time do we have? I think the
Well, I asked the
yeah. All
question
good.
in like 3-4
Yeah.
minutes to put the question
Yeah.
together. So, like, I imagine how much
Yeah.
time it will take to answer it.
So it's
So,
like a
take your
30-second
time.
answer, right? Yeah. No, I mean,
No,
so
no,
to be
take your
honest, I mean,
time.
most of my work happens with product teams. So I'm not too involved in like those cross department like consistencies, right? I think that again, I think in both ways, right? When you look at a product strategy, you will see your B2B business that operates through Salesforce. Like sales is a distribution channel for you, right? So from a product perspective, sales is a distribution channel.
Hmm.
From a sales perspective, the product is just the value you sell, right? So I think I love the point you brought up. I love that you brought up the point of empathy. It's like the same thing will look different for different people. For product, sales isn't a different. It's a distribution channel. For sales, product is just the thing you sell. Right? You use to convince the prospect. And so I think, and of course, only the company view gives you this bigger picture, right? As in, we want to go after this market, we want to solve the problems of this vertical, and we're either going to do self-service or sales or Salesforce distribution. The company has to make those choices to make sure what is prioritized. I think very often what I'm seeing is when you look at least the product strategy, and I'm sure this is true on the sales strategy as well, is like you need certain guidance just coming from the company level. It's like the company needs to make certain decisions to not create a vacuum where the teams then are lost in like, oh, do we do self? Can we do expand to the US? Do we do self service? Do we do a freemium trial? How much like fundamentals can you really question? And I think very often that is much more of a like gap in the company strategy clarity that leads to those conflicts between the teams. That's how I would probably see it. And if you find the one way to align all of these, just let me know. I will sign up for that webinar. But other than that, I think it's just
Yeah.
as I think you mentioned the perfect ingredients. It's empathy and clarity and continued conversation.
Yeah, and you said actually a magical word before before you started the actual answer, which is being value led, right? And I'll share with you my perspective as well. Like the way I try to answer this or try to explain what is product led or product led growth is it's not that the product management teams are the ones leading, but actually that we are obsessed and focused on the product itself. So developing the product, the value that could come out of the product is like what guide us all. And the differentiator here is that as product management people, we have a realization to that kind of value. So that's why we're always preaching product led, and so on. Maybe the terminologies are confusing, so it would be easier to promote value led, something like that. It's not about product teams should try to be the masters of everything, but with the correct objectivity and the correct way to evaluate different situations. Maybe the product teams, when you take a look at the end to end journey and process of how you want to elevate this product, you would say that okay, marketing should be leading at this point because now we are rolling out, for example, in specific markets, and sales are leading this, and we should put things together to support them, and so on and so forth. And I believe that this is the true value of product management work, is being able to put all of these moving parts together in an ecosystem that serves the product or the whole company. So it's not that the product team is leading, it's the product
100%.
value that we're trying to come up with is leading. And you just put it in two words, like, value led. And I think that's the correct term to that needs to be promoted much more than being product led or sales led and so on. It was super funny. I attended this conference titled Product Led, and in the next room it was Sales Led, and the following room, like they had three different conferences.
Of course,
talking to different departments, and everyone is like preaching how we should lead the organization and not the others.
I love that you brought up this. Honestly, I think it's a misconception that product led means product gets to call all the shots, right? Which I think it definitely isn't.
Yeah.
And I think it's which maybe it brings us maybe a little bit almost like full circle to the first conversation we had about like putting the value of the artifacts first and foremost. It's like working product led, whatever that means for you specifically, but generally speaking, working product led is a means to the end of producing more value for customers and for the business. You don't do it for the sake of it. It's like you do it because you think it increases your chances of solving customer problems and creating business value.
Right on. Very clear message. So the final thing that I wanted to ask you here, we've discussed a lot of the different categories of the artifacts or the business areas that you usually specialize in, and I know that you already, all of these things that you share with people in your webinars and courses and the content that you create, these are actually your genuine ideas and so on. But is there anything that you're still brewing in your head that you haven't really shared with anyone that would like, what is the, like, if you want to say Tim Herbig wants to say something out loud, like, what would
I
it
love
be?
that. It's probably
like you have an open mic right now. Like,
I think it's probably
get all your feelings out.
I think it's probably the first topic we touched on, which is that start to treat your practices like a product. I
Yeah.
think it's something that is implicit in some of my work, some of my writing. I haven't been that explicit or vocal about it. The more I look into things, the more I discuss the intersection of the domains I work in, the more it becomes clear to me that treating the practice like a product is an integral part of getting more value out of the practice.
Okay. Yeah, so it sounded clear and very clear message is one of the main things also that I always try to say. Um, and if there is any loyal follower that is watching this episode right now, there's something that I say in every episode, and don't you think that I will not say it in this episode just because I waited until the end. um, that there was this interview and for Steve Jobs in 1997, and he said something that is gold to me. That's why I say it in every episode. Don't be obsessed. Sorry, don't trust process people. Process people will kill your business. And it's about
Yeah,
people that are just obsessed with the process, not the value
yeah,
that is coming out of it. So I
yeah,
think both things complement each other, and that's why I say it in each and every episode, which really supports what you're saying. And I think like most of the problems that are happening in our business and our profession and
yeah.
product management comes out of being really obsessed with things and the textbook definitions and these
Hmm.
theoretical frameworks rather than just chasing the value and trying to achieve it whatever the cost is.
Yeah,
uh, on that note, Tim, I really want to thank you for this discussion. I actually didn't feel the time
yeah. Me
passing,
neither.
and yeah, it was really enjoyable for me, and
Yeah.
I continue to learn from you. Um, I thought that I would just be revising all the stuff that I read of your work before, but actually it was a genuine discussion, and I also learned a lot from it. So thank you so much again for making the time to do this. And
Thank you so much for having
yeah,
me and for making this such a delightful experience as a guest. I really enjoyed the conversation and the discussion as well. Really,
yeah,
really good feeling.
I I really appreciate it. And for our followers, if you have any questions, uh, reach out to me or to Tim on LinkedIn. Please put your questions in the comments. And also, if you have any suggestions for future guests or future topics to discuss, let us know in the comments. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and a Spotify channel, and follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram to know all the new updates. And stay tuned to the Product Live. And